I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Salvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right, guys, happy Tuesday. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And we are back, guys. I hope you've had a great weekend. Really quick, I do want to remind everyone I am going on vacation this week. This is my birthday week. So I'm doing a special live stream tomorrow afternoon. I know I don't usually go live on Wednesdays, but it's because I will not be here Thursday, Friday, or Sunday. So after tomorrow, the next time you'll see me here will be next Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. I may have a guest tomorrow. I'm waiting to hear back for confirmation about that. But catch me tomorrow afternoon. Just wanted to go ahead and shout that out. We will do call in tonight, guys. I do want to hear from you before I peace out this mofo. All right. But we have a lot to discuss tonight. I want to go ahead and give shout outs to people in the chat. What's going on? Miguel says, happy Taco Tuesday. Shout out to DC, says Space K Poetry by William Shatner. Interesting. What is up, Daniel? Only Congress can remove someone from the ballot, but states' rights. In my world, the orange loser wouldn't be allowed on Skid Row. Talking about that Trump story. We're going to get into that tonight. Shout out to Lawrence Johnson, says stupid bloody Tuesday. Shout out to Jimmy, says hi and bye. Shout out to P. Smith, says, did you hear Whoopi saying Biden has the power to put all Republicans in prison? I heard. Whoopi is wild. Shout out to Silver Surfer, says happy Taco Tuesday, Sabby. Shout out to Dr. Nick, says hi, everybody. Greetings, Lorez, says, hey, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. It's Super Tuesday. I voted for Barbara Lee for Senate. She's a Democrat, but she's been anti-war for a long time. Glad Scotus helped Trump 9-0 smash the like, y'all. Interesting. And I'm curious to see what those results will be in California as well. We'll discuss Super Tuesday tomorrow afternoon. Shout out to Hannah, says that picture of Trump is funny. It's a pretty funny picture. I thought it was pretty cute. Shout out to Sam, says Dr. Cruz, question mark. Greetings, Apnarg sends a maybe sad-faced? I'm not really sure. What's up, Dublin, says my allergies are kicking my butt, LOL. Yeah, we're having a bit of an early spring here in Massachusetts. At least it feels like it. Because like now it's like 40 degrees, which is not usual for this time of year. It's usually still pretty cold in March. What is up? Jelaine says present. Shout out to Red Six, says good evening, Sabby. Happy Tuesday. What is up over here in the house? Laverne says, hello, Sabby. Enjoy. And I enjoy watching and commenting. Thank you. Welcome. Shout out to Mark. Hey, Sabby, it's Puglies, not Pugsley, like from the Addams Family. People have called me that, though. Thank you for correcting me on that. Shout out to Jack, says, hi, everyone. Happy birthday, Sabby Sabs. JB sent me. My birthday is actually Friday, but thanks for the early birthday. It is Pisces season, guys. I'm really excited. Us Pisces people are a little different. My mom says we're moody. I think I can be at times. Sometimes. Maybe. Shout out to Pineapple Juice says, happy early birthday, Sabby. Thank you. Shout out to my comrade JB from RBN says, good evening, everyone. Forehead kisses. Happy B-Day, Sabby. Hashtag JB sent me. And shout out to Raul says, BRB. Greetings, April says, greetings, everyone. Shout out to Mastermind says, AOC's parents were killed by a powerful wizard named Genie Ozide. And now all the people in her village are afraid to say his name. Interesting. Shout out to Chris says, what's up, everyone? And shout out to Leroy who says, good day, comrades. We have a lot to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and share those beautiful patrons. You guys are keeping the damn lights on around here. All three of them, or actually four. Forgot about that one over there. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. Don't forget about those Sabbies. They're coming in like a football team. And shout out to members. I'm in a silly mood tonight, guys. You got to hear it. Shout out to members as well. And shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Genuine, Dana Cooper, and Roxana Marinakami. Oh, Marinakami. Yes, Roxana Marinakami. Genuine. Every time I hear that word, I think about the song. You guys remember the song from Genuine? Douche, douche, doo, douche, doo. Doo. I'm just a bachelor looking for a partner. Remember that song? That pony, let's do it. Okay. Anyway, sorry. 90s flashback. Giving a shout out for a show today as well before we get into the news. Love is Blind season 6 just started, and I just started watching it, and it is quite a doozy. I know not everybody is into this show, but I love this show because the idea of actually going to have a dates with people that you can't even see, and then actually having the guy decide that he's going to propose to you, a sight unseen. Like, again, you have not seen these people, so you don't know if you're going to be physically attracted to them or not. So that show it's a doozy. But this season, they actually have a contestant on that show who is a single mom. And I haven't seen that on this show before, not from what I remember. And it's already a little complicated, because the reality is, if you're a single parent, you're not just choosing someone for yourself. You're also choosing someone that you feel is going to be a good parent to your kid. A friend of mine, she's a single parent, and she's told me some stories. She's told me some stories. So it's a hot mess. Anywho, what are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? I could talk about Love is Blind all night, so don't get me started. Let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail, folks. Tonight, we are discussing Kamala Harris, AOC, and Bernie Sanders are gaslighting people. And in particular, they're gaslighting voters. They're gaslighting protesters. We're going to get into that speech that Kamala Harris had where people are declaring that she was calling for a ceasefire. I'm going to prove to you that is not the case. We're also going to discuss Dr. Wolff jobs. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Wolff is talking about not unemployment, but underemployment. Okay, we're going to get into that. And that's going to actually prove something that I've been saying, I would say, the past 2 years when people have said that the economy is great. So we'll get into that. We're also going to discuss, if you have not heard by now, Scotus helps Donald Trump. And you're right. Whoever said that in the chat, you are so right that that picture of Trump is funny. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing the Israeli real estate controversy. We're going to get into that discussion as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we will do call in tonight. So stay tuned for that. Really quick, though, if you haven't had a chance to do so, start us off right by smashing the like. Little rhyme for you there. And let's get into the first story. So While a lot of us have our eyes on what's happening in Gaza, one of the things I've continued to say on this show is that we cannot forget about the West Bank, right? Because it's really easy to forget about what's happening to Palestinians in the West Bank because there is the genocide in Gaza. Did you know that Israel has actually been hosting real estate events in the United States and in Canada to purchase homes in the West Bank? Now, again, these are the settlements. These are not homes that are available. People live in these homes. And this is also against international law. Now, there was actually a gentleman who actually stood up against this, and he is, in fact, Jewish. And he had some things to say. I want to go ahead and get into that clip here. And by the way, this was shared by, please follow him, the Muslim lawyer. Real estate seminars in the US and Canada selling West Bank settlement homes. So the gentleman that you're about to see on the video, his name is Rich Seagull. He's a Jewish resident of Teaneck, New Jersey. At last night's Teaneck Township Council meeting, he was raising concerns about a real estate event selling settlement lands in the U.S. or to the U.S. and to Canada. As Mr. Seagull argues, this would be in violation of domestic and international law. And I'll show you the other schedule for that as well that Margaret Kimberly shared in just a second. But let's get into this speech here from Mr. Seagull.
Hi, my name is Rich Seagull. I'm a 25-year homeowner here in Teaneck. I'm Jewish. The reason that I'm telling you that I'm Jewish is because I have a concern about something that's going on in the Jewish community. On March 10th, there is scheduled to be an Israeli real estate sales event at the Keter Torah Synagogue. That event violates both domestic law and international law. Violates domestic law because we had a Civil Rights Act in 1965 and a Fair Housing Act in 1968. We don't allow real estate events to be for whites only, for Jews only, for anybody only.
Let's pause here for a second. So yes, as you probably can imagine, those real estate events, they're only selling these homes to people who are, in fact, Jewish. And I'm actually going to show you a video of a guy who actually got a ticket to that event, but he's not Jewish, and you'll see him get turned away. So yes, that is a violation of international law and domestic law. I mean, imagine if we were going back to the 60s where they were refusing to sell homes to other races, and they were only willing to sell homes to white people in the United States. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still discrimination when it comes to real estate, and even when it comes to renting as well. But I've experienced that myself. So here we are again. I told you before, I feel like we're going backwards. We're not going forwards.
Now, as Jews, we don't get to fly under the radar and break the law and hide it in a synagogue. It violates international law because West Bank settlement homes are going to be available for sale at this real estate event. On the website, it lists 3 different West Bank settlements. Those settlements are in and of themselves illegal by international law. If we allow this sale to go through, we are enabling a local synagogue to violate both domestic anti-discrimination laws and international law. Now, there's other reasons we shouldn't allow it, okay?
Let me pause for a second. I want to just point your attention for a second to the other people in the room. Notice the people behind him. You see, there's a black man here, and there's actually, if you look by his elbow, there's a black woman sitting here. So just FYI.
There's a genocide going on right now. I don't care who that offends. More than 35,000 people have been killed. More than 13,000 children have been killed. People in this community are in deep mourning. People in this community are angry. I'm angry. Yeah. What this real estate event is going to do is it's going to fan the flames. If it goes forward, there will be a demonstration. I know there's going to be a demonstration because I'm going to organize it. It will be very well attended. What I'm saying needs to be done is, I don't know how much power this mayor and this council have to actually shut down the event, but I know you have the power to recommend that it be shut down. And I'm asking you to please do it. We don't need to have more divisiveness in this community, okay? We don't need to have Jewish privilege rule the day by saying we're entitled to break the law and have this real estate event and not care about how so many people in this community feel about it. Thank you for letting me speak.
So, yeah, and it's not just his neighborhood. It's not just Teaneck, New Jersey. New Jersey, by the way, is incredibly diverse. I don't know if all of you have ever been to New Jersey, but incredibly diverse, large international communities in New Jersey as well. But I want you to see the evidence for yourself. Again, shout out to the Muslim lawyer. Again, he actually captured this video as well. And you can see the flyer here, Israel Real Estate Expo, Thornhill. So again, it's not just Teaneck, New Jersey.
We are going to the Israeli Real Estate Expo in Thornhill today at 9 a.m. This is how we do things in Canada. Register, there's laws, there's rules, you register, no problem. Keller Williams sells real estate in Modin Ilit. Where is that, they say? Oh, it's in Israel? Okay. Why don't we go on Google, though? On Google, you type in Modin Ilit, and what does it say? It's a settlement in West Bank.
Okay, guys, does everybody see this? So you see what's happening here? You have Keller Williams, which is a pretty popular real estate company from what I'm aware of. At least they're well known here on the East Coast. They're participating in this. So it's not just the synagogue getting together to decide, let's sell these homes in the West Bank to people in the US and in Canada. You also have Keller Williams that's involved in this. Now, this particular guy in this video is in Canada. It's happening in the US and in Canada. See, what they do is they notice everybody has their eyes on Gaza right now, so they figure they can pull this while everyone else is turned away.
So now they're claiming the West Bank is Israel? Interesting. In Canada? Let's go there and clarify with them what's going on. Let's go to the police and maybe make a police report saying it's against international law. How's it against international law? Foreign Affairs site says occupied territories and settlements. Canada does not recognize permanent Israeli control over settlements. Then it says,
okay, Canada doesn't even recognize that. Doesn't even recognize it. But they're doing it anyway, and they're doing this at synagogues. Be Easy says, wait, that was in the US, I'm confused. Or B, excuse me, says, wait, that was in the US. The first video was in the US, was in New Jersey. This second video is in Canada. So it's happening in the US and in Canada. And I want to show you this as well, because Margaret Kimberly from the Black Agenda Report, she actually was able to share the entire schedule for the real estate event here. I want you to see this. So Margaret Kimberly said, hashtag ethnic cleansing. It says, welcome to the great Israeli real estate event coming to the US and Canada. So this is happening for the next 2 weeks. You see Montreal, that is today. Okay. And it's at the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue. Toronto is Thursday. That's at the Bay T. I don't know what that is in Toronto. The Teaneck, New Jersey one, that was the guy who spoke first. He was talking about this event coming up. That's Sunday. So you see, he got the word out before the event actually started. You have Lawrence, New York, which is Tuesday, March 12th. That's at Young Israel of Lawrence, Cedarhurst in Cedarhurst, New York. And you also have Flatbush, and I'm familiar with Flatbush, because I used to live in Brooklyn. I used to go shopping on Flatbush because everything there was incredibly cheap. Flatbush is Wednesday, March 13th, and that is at the Kai B'nai Yaakov Simcha Hall. And I sorry if I mispronounced that, but that is in Brooklyn, New York. So Do you see this, guys? Like, they have an entire flyer here for these events, selling homes that are in the West Bank. Again, these homes are not theirs to sell. The settlements that they have in the West Bank are also illegal according to international law. Now, there was one gentleman who tried to attend one of the events in Canada, and he is not Jewish. And I want to show you just how quickly he was shut down. And this is how you know, again, it's not like they're trying to, they shouldn't be trying to sell those homes anyway, but it's not like they're trying to sell to everyone. Censored Man captured this. He said Jews in Canada were selling land in illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. A man refused to enter the synagogue because he wasn't Jewish, even though he had registered for the event. Check this out.
This is private property. Actually, I have to leave. Where are you from? I'm from here. Here, where do I park for this? I don't care. It's not both here. This is private property. I registered. Where do I park? This is all private property. Yeah, I registered for the event. Where do I park? You can park at my house if you want. Where? At my house. Why? I registered for the property. That's your problem. No. So who can park here only? Jews only? What is it? So this is a private synagogue. No, but I registered.
So you see what's happening here? He registered for the event online because he knew what they were trying to do. So he wanted to go to this event to see what's happening. So probably so he can document it, who knows? But notice how they're turning him away immediately. So he already registered for the event, but we know why we're not allowing him in.
Sure. I don't care what you're doing. Who are you from? Where are you from? I'm from here. Which property are you from? I'm from here. So I don't get it. Where do I park if I register? You can park in hell. Why should I park in hell? Because you're wearing that shit on your head. What shit is on my head? You're representing a synagogue and you're calling this shit? Of course it is. From a synagogue? Think for yourself, sir. Where do I register for them? Where do I park? Sir, are you Jewish? I'm not Jewish, no.
See? And this, they give away the game right here. They say, are you Jewish? And he says, I'm not Jewish. No. Now on his hat, you'll see it in a second. His hat says Palestine on it, right? So he did this on purpose because he wanted to show you how even in Canada, right? And even in the United States, it's not just happening in Israel, how they are discriminating against people who are not Jewish.
Why are you here? Because I registered for a event. Why did you register for an event? Because they're selling land. I'm interested in purchasing land. Not for you. Have you signed up? Yes, I registered right here. I'm showing you my registration.
So did you hear what that guy said? He said, not for you. And this is all captured on video. Watch this.
Why did you register for an event? Because they're selling land. I'm interested in purchasing land. Not for you.
You hear that? That guy right there, he said, not for you. Mm-hmm.
Signed up? Yes, I registered right here. I'm showing you my registration.
I just want to know why you're here. I'll let him handle it.
I want to buy property.
Oh, you do?
That's why I'm here. I registered. I want to buy property.
So why are you wearing that hat?
I'm confused. To buy property in West Bank, you can't wear a hat.
You can wear a hat. Right?
Google says it's in the West Bank. Palestine is West Bank, so I want to buy property.
No, that's not right. You understand?
Palestine is not in West Bank.
So everybody can see what's happening here. And I'm so thankful that Middle East Eye actually captured this, as well as the Muslim lawyer on Twitter, that they captured this information. Because again, while we are talking about Gaza, it is very easy to forget about what's happening in the West Bank. And they knew that people would be distracted by the war. So of course, they take this time to try to sell these properties in the West Bank. Again, against international law and domestic law. And I want to show you this as well, because they called this out on Al Jazeera about how people are now distracted. I want to show you how the tensions in the West Bank have actually escalated. So let's go into this for a little bit here.
As the world is fixated on Israel's bombardment of Gaza, Israeli forces and settlers have escalated their violence in the occupied West Bank, continuing a long-standing agenda of ethnic cleansing to take over Palestinian land and cement a Jewish majority in historic Palestine.
I never felt this level of genocidal fervor from the Israeli side. The mood in the West Bank is of fear and deep terror.
The gloves are off, so to speak. They know that the world is not watching, and so Israel can get away with even more in the West Bank than they usually do.
At least 100 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since October 7th, including at least 30 children. Israeli forces have also carried out mass arrests, closed many roads, and increased the number of checkpoints to restrict people from moving. They've doubled the Palestinian prisoner population, and Israeli settlers are attacking Palestinians and have forcibly displaced entire villages. Some settlers are threatening Palestinians with leaflets that tell them that if they don't escape to Jordan immediately, they will be violently forced out.
Pause for a second. So you see what's happening in Gaza? They're trying to push them into Egypt. In the West Bank, they're trying to push them into Jordan. And that is to completely cleanse the land of the Palestinian people. And so that all the rest of that land will officially belong to the state of Israel. We have to share this with as many people as possible. Again, it's not just about Gaza. It's also about the West Bank as well.
Many in the West Bank are saying this is the most danger they've ever felt in their lives.
Palestinians feel that they're collectively under attack.
The West Bank and Gaza are both Palestinian territories that have been under Israeli military occupation since 1967. Unlike Hamas-ruled Gaza, the cities of the Israeli-occupied West Bank are controlled by the Palestinian Authority, whose security forces coordinate with Israel to control the Palestinian population.
Yep.
The nearly 3 million Palestinians who live in the West Bank have no freedom of movement, no rights, no citizenship, and can't vote in Israeli elections, despite the fact that they all live under Israeli rule.
So did you hear what she just said about how they can't vote in Israeli elections? So when people give you that talking point that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, make sure you mention that to them.
Since October 7th, the Israeli military has ramped up its assaults there, bombing a mosque and refugee camps.
لا يزال بعدنا احنا منطول في الاشلاء اللي تحت الردم ولا يزال بعدنا نركب الاحداث تبعته.
Inside Israeli prisons, reports have emerged of Israeli authorities punishing Palestinian prisoners with beatings, raids, by limiting food and access to medical clinics and canceling their relatives' visits. Then there's the surge in violence by armed Israeli settlers who are protected by Israeli soldiers. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports that Israeli soldiers and settlers detained 3 Palestinians from the West Bank village of Wadi Asik, beat them, stripped them to their underwear, urinated on them, and extinguished burning cigarettes on their bodies. This video from October 13th shows an Israeli settler aiming his gun.
Yeah, we can't show that part. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit here. Here we go.
In the village of Qusra. 2 more Palestinians were killed on the way to those men's funeral the next day. Here's what the mayor of that village told CNN about what life is like under the constant threat of violent Israeli settlers.
The situation is so bad. You can't even describe it. We're living in a devastating psychological state. None of us can sleep.
In fact, nearly 500 people have been forced to leave their villages in the past week, fearing for their safety.
We have seen 8 Palestinian communities completely ethnically cleansed. They're people that have been on this land for decades. They were all forced out of their homes.
More than 500,000 Israeli settlers live in the occupied West Bank, claiming a biblical right to be there. But even though these settlements are illegal under international law, they continue to expand, and the Israeli government has increasingly emboldened and empowered the settlers in recent years.
So one of the things I want to add here is they continue to use the excuse of religion. Religion is a belief, right? So you have the right to believe in whatever religion you want to believe, but it is a belief. And the problem that you have now is that, of course, Israel is trying to, they say, establish a Jewish state, a religious state. I really don't believe in religious states. I don't think there should be any state that is basically governed by like one religion. I don't believe that. I'm glad we don't have that here in the United States. Imagine if you were forced to be Christian, right? How would you feel about that? And then if you refuse to become Christian, imagine if they told you you had to leave the US and you had to go to Mexico or you had to go to Canada. Now take it a step further. And let's say instead of just focusing on the religion, they're also trying to ethnically cleanse the land. So what would that mean if that happened here in the United States? Imagine if African Americans, indigenous people, Latinos, etc., Asian Americans were forced out. Let's say it would start with a religion, and then let's say eventually it would become ethnic cleansing. So I just want to try to put you in the Palestinian people's shoes so you can understand what they've been dealing with for decades, actually. And there's a gentleman here I want to show you. It says fights to protect their only home from Israeli settlements in the West Bank. So you can see a family here going through this experience as well.
This is the only house standing on this hill in the occupied West Bank. Here, there are 3 illegal Israeli settlements, an illegal settlement outpost, an Israeli military camp, and 1 determined Palestinian family. To stay, they have to take extreme measures. They want to protect themselves from attacks by Israeli settlers.
We can't leave the house alone. My sisters got married and I couldn't even go to their weddings. They are always hovering around. I can't even get to work. One of us has to stay home because they might come at any time.
Okay, that piece there is very important because basically what he's saying to you is that they can't leave the house vacant. Somebody has to stay inside the house so that the Israeli settlers don't come and demolish the home once it's empty. I want to take this a step further and apply this to the United States. Now, we have a big problem in this country with gentrification, not exactly the same as what's happening in Israel. But when we talk about displacement, people are also being displaced here in the U.S. too, and it's being done through gentrification. And that's being led by a lot of people like to blame it on the professionals and say that they moved there and, that's what caused the rent to increase. And there's truth to that. But the reason why you have these luxury condos continuing to prop up, at least around here in Boston, DC went through this as well, Seattle, New York City, is because the city allows real estate developers to come in and buy up the land and the property. And the idea is that you will eventually own nothing. They want us to become a society of renters. But what you've seen over the years is you've seen a lot of these people that grew up in those working class communities, particularly here in Boston, African Americans that grew up in Roxbury or Dorchester or Mattapan, pushed out because they do allow the developers to come in. And when you build new luxury condos, obviously that is going to drive up the price of everything else around it. So those people who grew up in those neighborhoods can no longer afford to live there because the landlords will increase the rent to match, what's happening with the new development. And the people are slowly pushed out and they're pushed to the South Shore, pushed to the North Shore. And that is why if you come to Boston today, you don't see the same culture that once existed here back in the 80s or the 70s, even like the early 90s. The actual culture of what Boston was is gone. And we have become more, a city of chains, and there's a lot of professionals. If you go to the North End, what was the Italian neighborhood in Boston, you'll see Italian restaurants still, but you won't see those families living in that neighborhood anymore. They were pushed out. The Palestinian people are being pushed out of the West Bank. They're also being killed in the West Bank. It's like, if you don't leave, we're going to try to find a way to make you leave. It's crazy when you think about it.
Musab says the attacks are getting more frequent and more violent.
In 2002, the settlers burned the house and my dad had a heart attack a few days after.
He believes the Israeli settlement project has one main goal: to push Palestinians off of their lands.
Yep.
But this is the only land they've known, the only country they belong to, the only home they own for generations.
We were here before the settlers. My grandfather built the house in the 1970s. Then my father and mother inherited it. We are here protecting it as well and will pass it on to our kids.
Illegal Israeli settlements and outposts have been historically established on hilltops. Over time, they expand further, all at the expense of Palestinians.
If this family leaves their home, the area would be filled with Israeli settlers living illegally, as seen in many other places in the occupied West Bank. So far, the Safan family says they're the guardians of the hill, and they want to keep it that way. Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera, the occupied West Bank.
The occupied West Bank. Again, they are living under occupation. This is why when people say there's no occupation, that is a lie. When people say there is no apartheid, that is a lie. What Israel has done and is continuing to do to the Palestinian people is against international law. Now, they'll tell you that the settlements are illegal, but nobody is arresting the settlers. Nobody is holding them accountable. No, Israel is putting Palestinians in the West Bank. They're pulling them out of their homes and they're putting them in the prisons. And now you have Israel selling homes in the West Bank to US citizens and to Canadian citizens. And nobody's stepping in to stop it. Whatever you do, do not stop talking about what is happening in Israel. No matter who calls for a ceasefire or who comes forward when they're brave enough to say, hey, what's happening is wrong, don't stop talking about it. Because a lot of people that I have met had no idea this was even happening until the war started in Gaza. Let's go to some of the comments here. Jelaine says, if Sabby Sabs ever experiences that rent/buy discrimination in Boston, Cambridge, etc. area, this might be a place to break that skepticality on your online buddies. Let us know, perhaps, no stupid move. So that with the renting discrimination, that actually happened when I lived in New York. Yes, yes, yes. Randy says, happy early birthday, Sabby. Thank you so much, Randy. On Shawnee TV, I have been trying to tell people about this for over 10 years now, but people don't want to believe it. Well, thank goodness for Al Jazeera and other independent journalists that are reporting from the West Bank and from Gaza. And shout out to New Beginnings for the super sticker. Thank you so much. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you for the tip, Roger Meadows on Rockfin. Yes, Sabs, Cedarhurst is one of what we call in Long Island suburbs, the 5 towns, right outside Far Rockaway, Queens, New York City. Composed of Hewlett, Inwood, Woodmere, Cedarhurst, and Lawrence, hardcore Hasidic community, where MC Search of Third Base fame pretended not to be from, but saying he is from Far Rockaway for street cred back in the 80s. A lot of rich folks over there getting welfare checks, working the system. Well, well, well. Felt like a Florida Evans moment. Damn, damn, damn. We are moving on to our next story here. We're going to talk about underemployment. I've been trying to send the signal for quite some time that even though the Biden administration has been telling you that the economy is doing great, I've been trying to explain to you not so much, and not just in reference to the prices. One of the things that they've been bragging about is the job market. And they say that Joe Biden has created all of these jobs, but they never told you what those jobs were. Well, tonight, you're going to hear from Professor Richard Wolff about underemployment in the United States, and in particular, a certain group that it's affecting, and that is college graduates. Believe it or not, college graduates are dealing with underemployment. Let's get into it.
That shows that 52%, that's more than half, of recent college graduates found jobs for which only a high school diploma was an adequate preparation.
Pause. What did I tell you guys? Because you see, a lot of these jobs that have been created are not professional jobs that these students are qualified for. A lot of these jobs involve retail, the restaurant industry, right? Jobs that are not paying as much as you would think they were. So yes, people graduating from college are getting jobs, but according to that study from the Higher Ed Report, which I'm going to show you, 52% of college graduates are underemployed. So they are accepting jobs that are actually they're overqualified for. Now, why would they do that? They do that when you're desperate. You do that when you cannot find a job that meets your qualifications, but you have bills to pay. We also have to remember that student loans went back into repayment. So they have to pay those student loans. So you have to work somewhere. You got to pay rent. You got bills to pay. I tried to warn people about this.
Or in the language of economics, more than half of recent college undergraduates are underemployed. Okay, I want you to look at that with me. It means that those young people who took the time, the trouble, and spent the money, often borrowed money, to get a higher education, find themselves at the end of it with enormous debts, with huge hopes and expectations, but unable to get a job adequate to what they can do, to what they have been educated to do. That is a social failure. That means there's something about the economic system in which we live that is very badly misorganized. And
Pause here for just a second. And another thing I want to add as well, I'm very familiar with this because this happened to me, right? So I've talked about this before on this show, but, the housing crisis really messed things up, and not just for the year 2008. Like, this was a problem for years. I would say multiple years after 2008. It continued for quite some time. Some would still tell you that we're still trying to recover from the housing crisis of 2008. You'd have to talk to an economist more about that, and they can give you a lot more data. But I remember this all too well. Graduating from college, you have your degree, but the economy is in the pits. You're going through a recession. There's the housing crisis. So the jobs that you're actually qualified for aren't hiring anybody. They laid off some of the people that they already had. And then something else happened. The weird thing that happened is that you had the Gen X generation, and they were basically getting some of those jobs that some of the millennials were qualified for, or they had those jobs that millennials were actually qualified for during the housing crisis. So something changed in reference to the job qualifications. All of a sudden, positions that were entry-level positions, meaning that all you needed technically was a bachelor's degree and they would train you, all of a sudden, those positions, the requirements changed to must have 3 to 5 years experience. All of a sudden, the entry-level positions were no longer entry-level. And that is because you had people that were of retirement age during that time that were afraid to retire because of the housing crisis, because of the recession. So they stayed in their jobs, whereas otherwise they most likely would have retired. That means that people who were part of the Gen X generation, they were now in those jobs that were entry-level jobs that the college undergraduates should have been receiving. But because the Gen X generation, because they stayed in those jobs, that actually increased the requirement for you to qualify for those jobs to 3 to 5 years experience. For those who are wondering, that's where that comes from. So for those of us that were millennials, we were just kind of screwed. So we took whatever jobs we can get. And what were those jobs? Restaurant industry, whether you were waiting tables, whether you were bartending, those kind of jobs, because they'll hire you because they're going to train you anyway. Retail jobs, which actually don't make that much. Do you know the average middle-aged woman in this country is working a retail job, which does not pay that much? And this is part of the reason why my generation has been kind of kept behind when you talk about accruing any type of wealth in this country. That's part of the reason. That ain't all of it, but that's part of the reason. Got to go back to that 2008 housing crisis. So I'm very familiar with this. I remember having a college degree and working 2 jobs. And no one goes to college so that they can work 2 jobs. No one goes to college so that they can struggle and they can make minimum wage. And that's what was happening during that time. And here we are again. And I've been trying to warn people that this was coming. In fact, I knew part of this because I worked in higher ed for so long. But Professor Richard Wolff actually warned me himself about this on this show 2 years ago. He warned me what was coming. And here we are.
I'm being as polite as I can. Here are some of the facts you should know. If you start off your post-college job career life underemployed, the statistics show you will be paid less than you ought to be for the rest of your life. In other words, you're starting in a place that's going to hamper your income and the life you can lead for a long time.
And this is why more college graduates that are graduating from undergrad are choosing to go to grad school. I watched it over the years. I worked in higher ed for over 10 years. I watched it over the years. The number of graduate applications would continue to increase. And this is very common when the economy is in a rut. When the economy is in a rut, that's actually great for college admissions, particularly those of us that advise students in the graduate courses, because those college applications increase. People will go back to school because they know they're not going to get a decent job. The bad part about that is it often means you're going to have to take out more student loans. So then you end up in more debt. But the idea is that you'll have that advanced degree so you can get a better job and you'll make a higher salary. So by the time you finish the graduate program, you'll be able to go out there and get a professional job and you're going to make more. So it's going to pay off. But does it? From my experience, it didn't. So you'll see this happening where graduate admissions are going to go up. The applications are going to increase. Happens every time we tend to run into this type of economic situation or there is a recession. That's not uncommon. So just FYI.
It's not just the beginning. It also means that more and more young people are going to question going to college. I mean, if I spend 4 years and I spend all the money and I do all the work and I still don't get a job that can't be gotten by a high school graduate that doesn't need, in any general sense, what I just did. You know what that's going to do? It's going to continue what we're already seeing, declining enrollments in colleges and universities.
That's in reference to undergrad. And that's another thing that's happening. People don't want to be, weighed down with student debt. There's also alternative programs that you can do nowadays. Like you really don't have to go to a traditional college these days. Now, I would forewarn you about enrolling in universities like the University of Phoenix. Be careful with those not-for-profit colleges because they're just a money grab. And they will charge you like $5,000, $6,000 for one course that a traditional university is not going to charge you that much for that one course, particularly if it's a state school. So beware of those. But there's other things that you can do. I mean, it's if you're going into the tech field, there's boot camps. So I know people that have done coding boot camps. Some people say they're good. Some people say they're not. I think you got to find the right one, to be honest with you. So that's part of the issue that you'll face. There's been other things like Launch Academy. There's another one. I feel like General Assembly. That's another one. General Assembly, 2 years versus 4 years. And they just put you in the courses that you need for your degree. So you don't have to take all these extra classes, like the core classes, like I had to take when I was in undergrad. So people don't want the student debt. They're seeing what's happening to the generation before them. There's also trade schools. There's other things that you can do. The point that I'm trying to make is we may have gotten to the point in this country where it's no longer about you finding a job that you're passionate about. It seems like it's more now about you finding a job or you going into a field that is not going to cause you any type of extra debt, meaning student loan debt, but can still pay your bills.
A level of educated population that shrinks because many things happen in the 4 years of college. A lot of learning goes on in the dorm room, in the life you lead, yes, and in the classrooms, and in the interaction with other students that are spending time in classrooms and reading. There's a benefit to society that we've always understood that is going to be lost as more and more people choose against a life in a society that's misorganized in this way. The whole social structure will be affected. Colleges and universities are going to have a harder time than they already have meeting their financial obligations because they're not getting the students and therefore not the tuition and not the room and board and all the rest of the income they rely on now more than ever in the past. So it's
And something I want to add here as well, I want you to think about even canceling student loan debt. And I swear I've argued with people about this on social media. Even canceling student loan debt, the problem that you still have is that colleges are continuing to increase tuition. So canceling student loan debt doesn't solve the problem. There's no cap on these colleges. There's no cap. Where are we in this country where the University of Massachusetts, which is a public state school, this is not a fancy college, it's not a private school, now costs just as much as some of the private colleges in a place like North Carolina? How did that happen? How did it happen that these state schools, first of all, if you are in state, so if you live in Massachusetts and you want to attend a state college, public state college, why are they charging you tuition? Somebody let me know. I should have created a poll about this. Think about it, folks. It wasn't always this way. But if you are in state, I don't care whatever state you live in, if you live in North Carolina and you decide to attend a public state college in North Carolina, not out of state, why are they charging you tuition? I can understand if they want to charge you room and board because you are living there and you are using the facilities, electricity in the dorms, etc. But why are they charging you tuition? You already have to pay for the books. Just another way to make money.
It's going to problematize the finance. You see the social consequences? The society that fails to provide really adequate jobs to its college graduates is pushing itself downward in the level of social development. It's shooting itself in the foot. It is hurting itself, and it shouldn't be done, and it shouldn't be allowed, and it's something we all ought to understand because it's a problem that will impact us in 1,000 ways as it unfolds. And it is getting nowhere near the attention and the critical awareness that it deserves.
People got to understand that, like, it's changed. Jack says, is a state college the same as a community college? Community colleges are 2-year institutions. So, for example, a friend of mine is a dental hygienist. She went to a community college to get that degree. It's an associate's degree. But she actually started out making a pretty good salary for going to community college, just FYI. Whereas the state schools are typically the 4-year public colleges. So it's really interesting. I want people to understand, and I want to show you what that study actually says, because Richard Wolff bringing light to this, it says a lot. We bring this up here. This is the study that Richard Wolff is referring to. It is the Inside Higher Education study. More than half of recent 4-year college grads are underemployed. So a new report found that many recent graduates don't land jobs that require a degree. Like I said, a lot of these kids, they end up waiting tables or working a retail job. Sales is another one, which a lot of the sales positions don't require a 4-year degree either. And they train you. So it goes on to say here, a decade after graduation, 45% of them still don't hold a job that requires a 4-year degree. So they're saying, going a step further, 10 years later, 45% of these kids still don't have a job that requires that degree. And then add on top of that, if you have student loans, now you got to pay back these student loans that you acquired for attending this university to get this degree that you're not even going to get a chance to use. So think about that as well. It goes on to say that the report defines underemployment as holding a job that doesn't require a bachelor's degree, signified by at least half of employees in that role not having one. Colleges and universities, states in our country can do more and should do more to help students prepare for the critical transition from college to the labor market. Now that's coming from Stephen Moret, president and CEO of Strata Education Foundation. Okay, so Stephen, if you feel that colleges and universities should do more to prep these students for the transition from college to the labor market. I agree with you about that. But here's the problem. Number one, we need to have more free internships, or excuse me, not free internships, more paid internships in this country. One of the problems that people like myself and other colleagues of mine that we went through is that a lot of the internships that give you that transition into that field of yours are unpaid. If you're coming from a working class family, I know I was not able to just stop working when I was in college. So I worked when I was in college and I worked during the summer. So if I were to take an unpaid internship, that would mean that I can't keep the job that I have. So this whole idea of unpaid internships is just another way for companies to get free labor. That should not happen. More people need to push back on that. What do you mean unpaid? Pay these kids. They're working. So there's that. So unpaid internships, and there's more unpaid ones than paid ones, those actually hurt students that are coming from working class families and middle class families, and particularly students that had to take out student loans. That's one thing that needs to be fixed. And then two, these universities need to stop offering degrees that actually don't produce jobs. And people can say whatever they want, but it is what it is. The history degrees, psychology degree, I got a degree in philosophy. A lot of these, this is why some of the liberal arts colleges are continuing to close, because you're offering degrees that are no longer marketable. These kids can't get jobs. But first step, all internships should be paid internships. No more unpaid internships. The report found that graduates who started their careers at a below college level job typically stayed underemployed for years afterwards. The majority of graduates, 73%, who are underemployed in their first jobs remained so a decade after they graduated. In contrast, 79% of graduates who started off in a college level job continued to hold jobs at that level 5 years after graduating, which makes sense. You already got your foot in the door. And other graduates who held college level jobs 5 years after graduating, 86% had college level jobs a decade out. And another thing that's been happening as well, and I noticed this just being an advisor, I worked very closely with the career counselor. So I would tell him the information I had, and he would tell me the information that he had. And one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of the kids that were graduating, I would say within the past 10 years, that did get those jobs, they were more likely to probably leave that company or that position within the first 1 to 2 years. Now, why is that? It's not because they don't want to work hard. It's not because they're not dedicated. It's because they want to make more money. And the fastest way for you to make more money is to move around. This is why you see that happening more often with Gen Zers. That wouldn't happen if these companies would go back to the model that they used to have, where they actually promoted employees after a first couple of years, where they actually gave a raise based on your performance and not just this standard baseline 2% wage and everybody gets the same wage. Again, that goes back to equality and equity. Because if everybody gets that 2% base wage, but some people are working harder than others, and then you have some people who are already making a higher salary, yeah, you got equality because you gave everybody a 2% wage, but you don't have that equity. So these are a lot of things that we need to talk about. Not giving them promotions, so that's why they move around. And also the cost of living is much higher. For my generation, wages did not adjust for inflation. So in order to make more money, that's what you have to do. You have to move around. And you'll see that happen a lot more often. And yes, hiring bosses, they get really upset about it. It pisses them off because they're like, I hire these kids and they stay here for 1 year or 2 years and they go somewhere else. How much are you paying them? Do you know how much rent costs in Boston? Don't you know we're dealing with inflation? Don't you see the grocery store prices? Don't you know these kids have student loans? What do you expect them to do? Go back to the days where you used to give employees a pension. When my dad and like my grandparents, they mentioned pension to me, I was like, oh, what? A lot of these companies are not giving people pensions anymore. Those days are long gone. They want you to do a 401k. And if you're making a low salary and you have student loan debt and you have expensive rent, whether you have 4 or 5 roommates or not, the last thing you're going to do is take part of your paycheck and put it into a 401k. Just telling you from experience. But they moved away from pensions and implemented 401ks. Excellent discussion there from Professor Richard Wolff. Katie Lewis says a majority of the new jobs, according to the BLS, are personal health service occupations, which have a salary of $30,000 a year. That's right. That's right. I'm not even tell you guys, I'll tell you guys what I was making. When I graduated from undergrad, when I finally did find a professional job, you know what they wanted to pay me? They wanted to pay me $8 an hour. I kid you not. Pat says, my millennial son's friends who did best did not go to college, but got certified jobs. There it is. There you go, Pat. Thank you for the super chat, Jojo. The company I work for just laid off 100 people today. I was spared, thankfully. Shit is getting a little too real. And this is what Joe Biden's administration won't tell you. Thank you, unemployed scholar. Grad school is a trap. Only possible secure academic job if you get a PhD. That's 7 years of grad school. It's true. For some professions, though, you have to get a graduate degree in order to move up in that field. So like, for example, for me working in higher ed, in order for me to become an academic advisor, I had to get a grad degree. So I had to get my master's. That's another thing they'll do to you too. Oh, and by the way, if you're thinking about being a teacher here in the Boston area of Massachusetts, you need a master's degree. And all the other certifications that they continue to add as the years go on. SF said, I went to Bridgewater State in Massachusetts. I'm still in debt. Yeah, so that's a public school. Yep. Steven said, Obama went to school. He got a pretty good job. I'm sure Michelle would have done fine too. Obama went to Harvard and Michelle went to Princeton. When you go to a school like Harvard or Princeton or Stanford, there are doors that are open for you that are not open to those of us that went to a public school. It's just the reality. It actually says a lot when you have Harvard on your diploma or Yale or Princeton than like the University of Massachusetts. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. During the housing crisis, Gen X lost their jobs and were forced to take entry level. There it is. Not because they wanted, they were downsized and corp did not want to hire them at pay appropriate to experience. Yep, there it is. And thank you, Janine. Forcing folks to work in public service jobs for 10 years to get the federal student loan forgiveness stifles wealth growth. Yep. Actually, a friend of mine is doing that. I think she said she has 2 more years left, but yeah, you're 100% right. It's true. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Skip. The federal government should get out of the loan guarantee business. Government guarantees allow the university to raise their tuition. Yeah, that's true. That is for reals. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash the like button. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe and share. And we're moving on to Scotus. So it appears that the Supreme Court, all 9 judges of the Supreme Court have actually ruled in Donald Trump's favor. This is a big win for Donald Trump, regardless of what people try to tell you, especially in reference to ballot access. This is a huge win, and I'm going to show you something else in reference to the polls that might take you by surprise. Glenn Greenwald said it best. All 9 judges of the U.S. Supreme Court, including Sotomayor, Kagan, and Brown Jackson, reversed the Colorado State Supreme Court decision to ban Trump from the ballot on the ground that he is an insurrectionist, saying states can't decide this. Ladies and gentlemen, this includes the justices that were appointed by the Democratic Party. Talk about a unanimous decision. So that is what they are saying. They're saying the states cannot decide that. He goes on to say, recall how many experts on op-ed pages and cable shows told you Colorado acted correctly, only for the Supreme Court to unite unanimously to reject this deeply anti-democratic attempt by various liberal elites to ban their main political opponent from the ballot. Yeah. Let's get into it. We're going to get into this clip here from MSNBC. As you guys can imagine, they are not happy about this. Oh, what happened there? Oh, I forgot to press the wrong thing. They are not happy about this because they're like, no, we wanted to keep him off the ballot. I told you guys before, I don't agree with anyone being removed from the ballot. I don't feel like that represents democracy. I've continued to say, if you want to beat Donald Trump, beat him at the ballot box, but don't remove people from the ballot. And they can do this to anyone. They can do it to your fave too, right? Don't remove people off the ballot because you're afraid that they may be a threat to Joe Biden winning re-election. Let's get into this. They were not happy, honey.
The very same day that the disgraced ex-president was supposed to go on trial in a federal courthouse for his efforts to end democracy as we know it, that little January 6th insurrection, the highest court in the land today kept him on the ballot in a ruling that dodges the facts of January 6th and Trump's role in it. But instead, the Supreme Court handed Trump a second gift in as many weeks on a constitutional technicality. In an unsigned opinion, the justices say that states do not have the power to bar candidates from running for federal office. They say this, quote, because the Constitution makes Congress rather than the states responsible for enforcing Section 3 against federal office holders and candidates, we reverse. They're referring to the decision by the Colorado State Supreme Court. Now, that court found that Trump did engage in insurrection by trying to overturn the will of the voters by any means possible, including violence, and that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does in fact apply to the presidency. Now, the Supreme Court's decision today does not touch on either the question of whether Trump is or is not an insurrectionist or whether the text of Section 3 applies to him. Instead, it says that only Congress has the power to do anything or to enforce the 14th Amendment. And as Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold points out in her reaction to today's ruling, quote, if we had a functioning Congress, we would not be in the situation we're in today.
Pause for a second. If we had a functioning Congress. So the Supreme Court is saying that that's actually Congress' job, right? Not like Colorado can't just do this on their own. So the majority of the representatives in the House right now are Republican. I don't know. I mean, if Democrats were really trying to get Trump with this, maybe they should have paid much more attention to those congressional seats instead of worrying so much about focusing on Joe Biden. They should have paid more attention to those congressional seats. And yes, it's true. There wasn't a red wave in the midterms, but they still lost the House. And a number of people continued to tell me this is not a big deal. It's not going to matter. And I said, okay, let's see how that goes. But the Republicans control the House right now.
With American democracy. In a separate opinion, the three liberal justices blasted the majority on the Supreme Court for closing the door on the possibility of federal courts disqualifying Trump or any other candidate who would engage in an insurrection. Writing this, quote, Section 3 serves an important though rarely needed role in our democracy. The American people have the power to vote for and elect candidates for national office, and that is a great and a glorious thing. The men who drafted and ratified the 14th Amendment, however, had witnessed an insurrection and rebellion to defend slavery. They wanted to ensure that those who had participated in the insurrection and in possible future insurrections could not return to prominent roles. Today, the majority goes beyond the necessities of this case to limit how Section 3 can bar an oath-breaking insurrectionist from becoming the president. Although we agree that Colorado cannot enforce Section 3, we protest the majority's effort to use this case to define the limits of federal enforcement of that provision. That's where we start today with some of our most favorite experts and friends.
Let me just say something for a quick second. One thing I wanted to add to this is that this is why I continue to say over and over again, and I didn't vote for Trump. I don't support Trump, right? But I said over and over again, until he's actually found guilty of this insurrection, who are you to even take him off the ballot in the first place? He was never found guilty. They just skipped over that entire part.
Former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Hafey's back with us. He testified in the Colorado case when it was in front of the state's court. Senior editor for Slate and host of the Amicus podcast, Dahlia Lithwick, is back with us. With me at the table, once again, former top official at the Department of Justice and MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here. And Princeton University professor and distinguished political scholar Eddie Glaude is at the table. So nice to see you, my friends. Let me start with the what of it. Andrew Weissman, with you. What did the Supreme Court say and do today?
So they did a lot more than we thought they would do. Everyone after the oral argument thought that Trump would be allowed to be on the ballot in Colorado and, frankly, any of the other states.
And just explain why we knew that, why we thought that.
Because the argument, a lot of times people say you really can't tell from an argument. Here, there was just no friendly question, and you had no friendly question. You had a legitimate argument, and you had sort of the atmospherics of the court being, we don't want to be the ones deciding this.
What was interesting about this guy, if you guys take a look at him, right? He looks like he could be a character on a 1970s TV show because he has like the brown, like, is that velour? Is that velvet? I feel like I'm coming to America. This is beautiful. Is that velvet? I don't know, whatever, but it looks like one of those jackets that you would see from the 1970s. Plus he has on, I think this is brown tie. Is that gray or brown? Well, you know, like the turkey gravy tie and stuff like that. He gives me like that 1970s look. Is it corduroy, Earl? Is it Okay, wait, is that Earl? Oh, Bad Cookie said it's corduroy. Okay, it's corduroy, whatever. Everybody's like, it's corduroy. But he looks like he could be on, like, if he was a guest character on, like, Sanford and Son or something like that. Or I forget that other one. What's the other one? Chico and the Man? Anyway.
Had sort of the atmospherics of the court being, we don't want to be the ones deciding this. The reason they went further, and the reason this is a 5-4 decision, is where it sort of went to. Everyone agreed he can be on the ballot in Colorado and that the states cannot decide this. The reason it's 5-4, and notably the men versus the women, which was just a remarkable split, with Amy Coney Barrett joining the three so-called liberal justices, was that they said this applies not just to the presidency, but all federal office holders. Technically, what was before them was just the president. But more than that, the big sort of 5-4 split was that the majority said only. It's not that the states can't do it. It's that only Congress can do it. So you're picking the one institution that is completely dysfunctional and isn't going to do it. So if you want the big picture, you want to read this provision out of the Constitution, the only way to do it is to say Congress has to enact legislation to implement Section 3. No room, as you pointed out, for the courts, the federal courts to step in.
I don't think that's going to happen, considering the fact, again, like I said, the Republicans do control the House, and there's also splits within the Republican Party in the House as well, too, right? Like there's that Trump base of the Republican Party in the House, and then there are those that prefer more like a Nikki Haley or that type of Republican candidate, some that have gotten off of the Trump train, so to speak. So I don't think that that's actually going to pass in the House unless by some weird miracle or whatever. But someone mentioned Weezer in the chat too, and I can see the Weezer vibe. I can see the Weezer, the Buddy Holly. Ooh, wee, ooh, I look just like Buddy Holly. Uh-oh, and you're Mary Tyler Moore. I don't care what they say about us anyway. I don't care about that.
That's the part where Amy Coney Barrett said, look, why do we need to reach that? You are sort of needlessly inflaming in a political year the issue when our job in the court should be to try to just decide this issue and lower the volume.
lowering the volume by not weighing in Tim Heaphy on whether he is or is not an insurrectionist?
Yeah, it doesn't touch the core facts, Nicole. The Supreme Court decides questions of law, not questions of fact. They, as Andrew just explained, found that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment cannot be invoked by a state government. It has to be invoked by Congress. Some of the justices went further and said it'll take actual enabling legislation. But what America should take away from this is that that's a question of law, not a question of fact. The Supreme Court didn't find that Colorado was wrong in its finding that the former president engaged in insurrection. They actually found that he did. Several states have similarly found, much as our committee recommended. And those are the allegations, the factual allegations that are going to come before federal juries, barring Supreme Court ruling on an immunity question down the road.
But he was not found guilty. He said dime store Bill Clinton, but he was not found guilty though. Like that's the thing. And what's interesting is, like, you would have thought that Colorado would have done their research, or the court in Colorado would have done their research before they actually went forward with that. It's also interesting too, considering the fact that Colorado has been blue. I think for at least the past 2 elections, maybe 3 actually, Colorado has been blue. So I don't, like, when people were talking about like Trump was banned in Illinois and banned in Colorado, I think Maine may have reversed their decision. I have to go back and check. But these aren't states he would have won anyway. Illinois is blue. Colorado is blue.
So it's a victory for the president because it keeps him on the ballot. But again, it just doesn't touch really the core issue here, was whether or not what he did on and before January 6th was criminal. We found that it was. Special counsel has alleged that it is. And ideally, a jury will get to decide that question in some months.
So you guys heard that, right? We're going to go into the next clip, but notice what he said there. There is going to be a jury that is going to decide whether or not Donald Trump was guilty of that insurrection. Well, to go on, there's actually a retired federal judge who is very upset with the Supreme Court's ruling. And he's saying that it's overreach. This dude is retired. Somehow they pulled him out retired. Like, if I'm retired, I'm just trying to chill. Like, I'm not trying to come back and do any appearances or anything like that, or weigh on any of these legal matters. But somehow they found him. Let's get into this segment with Jake Tapper.
The Supreme Court unanimously deciding today that Colorado must allow Donald Trump to be on the presidential ballot. But there was some disagreement on how far that ruling should stretch. 5 of the conservative justices wrote that no state can ever remove any federal officer from a ballot. The 3 liberal-leaning justices disagreeing wrote, quote, "The majority announces that a disqualification for insurrection can occur only when Congress enacts a particular kind of legislation pursuant to Section 5 of the 14th Amendment. In doing so, the majority shuts the door on other potential means of federal enforcement. The majority attempts to insulate all alleged insurrectionists from future challenges to their holding federal office." That is very legalese, but it is a tough thing to accuse the majority of doing, insulating and protecting insurrectionists. Joining us now, retired conservative federal judge J. Michael Luttig. Judge Luttig, you predicted that the Supreme Court would affirm Colorado's decision to remove Trump from the ballot, calling Colorado's decision unassailable in every single respect under the Constitution, unquote. I guess the justices didn't see it your way. What's your reaction?
He looks tired too. Like, the retired judge looks tired. He's like, why did you wake me from my slumber? Why am I here? I retired, damn it.
Today's ruling, Jake, was both astonishing and unprecedented, not for its decision of the exceedingly narrow question presented by the case, though that issue was important, but rather for its decision to reach and decide a myriad of the other constitutional issues surrounding disqualification under 14th Amendment. In reaching and deciding those questions unnecessarily, the court, the majority, as the concurrences said, effectively decided that the former president will never be disqualified from holding the presidency in 2024 or ever, for that matter, But even more importantly, as the concurrence said, effectively, the court today decided that no person in the future will ever be disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, regardless whether he or she has engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah.
That piece right there is very important, and that's damning right there. They said that in the future, no person will be barred because of this.
Pretty stunning.
The concurrences, it's stunning in its overreach. It's a textbook example, Jake, of the kind of activist judicial opinion from the 1960s and the Warren Court era that begat the conservative legal and judicial movement in the 1970s and 1980s. But of course, it's different here because this is unmistakably a conservative court, most of whose members were leaders of that conservative movement, at least in the 1980s forward.
Judge Liddick, what do you...
But the other thing is, too, we cannot forget the fact that even the liberal justices also voted along with the conservative justices. Now, if you want to make complaints about some of these decisions that these justices have made, I go back to what I've always said before, is that there should be term limits applied to the Supreme Court. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know of any jobs that I've had or my friends have had that is a lifetime employment. In fact, a lot of these jobs will tell you this is a at-will employment state, or at-will employment at this company. We can fire you at any given time without reason. That's what it said when I worked at Boston University. Like, they don't have to give you a reason to let go of you. But the Supreme Court justices automatically get a lifetime appointment. And that gets to the point where even when they are sick and they know that they should step down and retire, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg was, they choose not to. They choose to just stay there and hold that seat. So if you really are upset with some of the rulings that these justices have made, I think you should be pushing for term limits on the Supreme Court.
Say to a young person watching this who says the fix was in? These are conservatives protecting Donald Trump, and according to the three liberal justices, they acted in such a way today to protect all insurrectionists. When there was an impeachment against Donald Trump for the insurrection, a lot of Republicans said, no, that's not for Congress, that's for the courts. The Colorado Supreme Court tried to act on that, and the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, this is for Congress. I mean, there are a lot of Americans out there who are skeptical of the court. I don't know that this is going to help.
The best answer I would give to those young people, Jake, is this. The concurrence said what I just said that they said. And Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who did not join the other five in the overreaching decisions that it made, accused the three concurrences of stridency in their opinions. For your listeners and your viewers, there was not one word of stridency in the concurring opinion by Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. Not one single word of stridency.
Well, it is what it is, though, and it looks like this is a win for Donald Trump, right? It just seems like they keep hitting Donald Trump with all of these different accusations or allegations, whether you support Trump or not. Like, obviously, you can see it as a witch hunt, but it seems like there has been some success in New York in reference to his business dealings with that case. The Fani Willis case involving Donald Trump in Georgia has turned into an absolute nightmare. The focus is now more about Fani Willis than it is on Donald Trump because of some of her discretions that she had and her involvement with the situation. But there's something else attached that I think you guys need to see. And I saw this today. Shout out to Professor Zinkas, who sent this to me. People need to get ready because there is a new poll. And I shared this earlier today Breaking news, according to a new poll, Trump now has 23% support from Black voters. 23%. The number continues to increase. So we can see it here. Actually, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see the picture better. If the 2024 presidential election were held today, who would you vote for if the candidates were Joe Biden? So for Joe Biden, you can see registered voters are giving him a 43%. If you go over to race and ethnicity, you will see 40% white, 66% Black. Now that's 66% Black. Joe Biden had 87% of the Black population. He's down to 66, 40% Hispanic, 43% other. But if you look at Donald Trump, this is wild. 48% of registered voters said they would choose Donald Trump. So that still puts Trump ahead of Joe Biden. And if you move over again to race and ethnicity, 53% of white voters support Donald Trump. 23% of Black voters now support Donald Trump, and 46% Hispanic voters support Donald Trump, 45% other. So Donald Trump, actually, if you look at the Hispanic vote, Donald Trump actually has a larger support of the Hispanic base than Joe Biden does now. He has 46%. Joe Biden has 40%. And when it comes to the Black vote, yes, of course, Joe Biden still has more than Donald Trump, but Donald Trump did not have 23% of the Black vote in 2020 or 2016. He has continued to increase that. If the Democratic Party doesn't see this as an issue, they're either in denial or they're a little too optimistic about Joe Biden's capabilities and the Democratic Party's way of persuasion in reference to Donald Trump derangement syndrome. This is a problem. Another thing that's a little strange. Now, this was interesting as well. If we look at the age group, 18 to 29-year-olds, 53% for some reason still supporting Joe Biden. That's actually surprising. Part of that could be due to canceling some portion of student loan debts. 41% of that same group support Donald Trump. So that 18 to 19-year-old base is interesting. Now, keep in mind, this poll does not include RFK, Cornel West, Jill Stein. It doesn't include any of the, Claudia De La Cruz, none of the third party or independent candidates. I would imagine when you insert those other options in, those numbers will decrease for Donald Trump and for Joe Biden with that 18 to 29-year-old range. But the fact that Donald Trump now has 23% of the African-American vote, that should be a wake-up call to everyone. And I said in this tweet here, the number one issue for voters is the economy. So you know that Joe Biden really messed up. And I believe Roger had pointed out that youth vote to me, but I believe Cool Blue actually responded to this. I believe this was the one I saw from Cool Blue. Yes. Cool Blue said in 2020, Biden nationally carried voters, Black voters, with 87% versus 12% for Trump. A margin of Democrat plus 75 percentage points. That poll, the one I just showed you, Biden has 66% versus Trump 23%, is a national margin of D plus 43. That would be a 32-point drop off from 2020 to 2024 of party support with Black voters nationwide. I have been trying to sound the alarm about this. I've been trying to tell people that if you don't do the things that you promise with the economy, and don't come at me with this canceling the student loan debt. I got to do a whole tiff with people on Twitter about that today. Don't come to me with the canceling the portion of the student loan debt, because as I've said multiple times on this show, canceling student loan debt does not close the racial wealth gap. You still have a significant portion of the Black population that does not have student loan debt because they did not attend college altogether. So don't come with me. Don't do that. We're not doing that tonight. But, sorry, I'm still a little ticked off, if you can tell. But that is incredibly significant. I do not remember since I've been old enough to vote, I don't remember a Republican candidate getting 23% support of African Americans in any poll, in any. So I don't remember George W. getting that. I don't remember Trump getting that in 2016, let alone 2020. People are pissed. People are broke. It's like a Color Purple moment. You show is po and you's tired. That's how people feel right now, honestly. But people really need to wake up. There were a number of things that Joe Biden promised, particularly to African Americans, that he did not fulfill. He didn't even fulfill the $15 minimum wage. You can't make these promises to people and then expect them to just show up for you just because. And people have been hurting the past couple of years since Joe Biden has been in office. It's a hot mess. Oh, here's Cool Blue now. Thank you for the super chat, Cool Blue. Also in that poll, Trump would win a Republican pickup of voters, 30 to 44, and Democrats would underperform in the group 18 to 29. In 2000, they were in 2000, they were D by plus 24. The poll is D plus 12. Thank you for that, Cool Blue. Tim, though, Sabs, looking cute today per usual. That color is so pretty on you. Oh, thank you. That's really sweet. I'm an independent now mainly because of you. Love the show. Tear down the duopoly. That's all right, Tim. Let's give it up for Tim, guys. Let's give it up for Tim in the chat. Leaving the duopoly. That's what I'm talking about, folks. Shout out to my comrade JB. I would like to see the liberals try to tell me, but the Supreme Court pick when I say I refuse to vote Democrat or Republican, justifying this ruling now. Well said, JB. Thank you, Larez. They picked the 14th Amendment, used insurrection part, ignored due process part. It was so obvious. Insanity. They tried to do this. They did. Like, how you just skip over, like, I don't know, finding someone guilty or innocent or not. Thank you for the super chat, Cool Blue. Colorado and Virginia realigned with Democrats with Obama in 2008. Yes. So it has been a couple of, you're right. Past three. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. Not a win for Trump, Sabby, but a win for thirds and indies. Ooh. And thank you for the super chat, Sam. Didn't Biden promise to cancel all HBCU debt? LOL. Yes, he did for people who made under $125,000 a year. And he didn't do that. He also promised those $2,000 checks to people in Georgia if they were to elect Warnock and Ossoff. And they did elect them, and they didn't get $2,000 checks. Joe Biden shortchanged them. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Skip. The Congress has to impeach the president and find him guilty of insurrection. He hasn't been tried. Was the 14th even supposed to be used in this case? Well, you know what, Skip? That is a good question. That is a good question. People just do stuff and they don't even. Yeah. People just do stuff. They don't think about it. But speaking of people just doing stuff, we're moving on to the Kamala story. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you very much. The Kamala story. Kamala Harris gave a speech in Selma, Alabama. And people sort of ran with this. The media sort of ran with it. And they said, Kamala Harris is calling for a ceasefire. But is that what she did? Did she actually call for a ceasefire? Now, MSNBC actually came right out of the gate with it. They said Vice President Kamala Harris calls for an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war during a speech in Selma, Alabama. Let's listen to the speech ourselves, and then we're going to dive into this whole gaslighting story here from Kamala Harris, AOC, and Bernie Sanders. They're all gaslighting. Let's dive in.
And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. for at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
Okay, I think we all heard the same thing that I just heard, right? Okay, let's just hear it one more time just to make sure, because I'm going to show you how MSNBC is already lying with the headline.
The immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire.
Notice she paused there, right? I'll tell you why that happened.
For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
For at least the next 6 weeks, which is currently what is on the table. Mainstream media, pundits for the Democratic Party, they're all writing these headlines that says Kamala Harris calls for an immediate ceasefire, which is exactly where she paused right after that, right? Then she went on to say at least for the next 6 weeks, which is actually on the table. This is no different from what Joe Biden already proposed. And I really want people to start paying attention. This was not Kamala Harris making some great effort here to call for something bolder than Joe Biden already called for. She's just repeating what Joe Biden already entertained and put on the table. So what they are actually calling for is a pause, a ceasefire, especially a permanent ceasefire. There is no pause. You just stop it altogether. You stop the war altogether, right? So that's actually what she's calling for. But if you notice here, what MSNBC does, and other outlets have done this as well, Vice President Kamala Harris calls for an immediate ceasefire, and they stop it right there, right where she pauses, and they leave out the part that she said for the next 6 weeks. What they should have said is that Kamala Harris calls for a temporary pause for the next 6 weeks in Gaza, not that she calls for a ceasefire, but that's on purpose. And I'm going to tell you why I think they did that. Let's continue.
This will get the hostages out and get a significant amount of aid in. This would allow us to build something more enduring, to ensure Israel is secure, and to respect the right of the Palestinian people to dignity, freedom, and self-determination. And given the immense scale.
Okay. All right. So here's what I think is happening, folks. Brace yourselves. I really think this is the Democratic Party's way of trying to slide in Kamala Harris to replace Joe Biden. Because it wasn't just this speech and the attention that the speech received. They were trying to make it seem that it's okay, Kamala is more further to the left than Joe Biden. And they paused it right there, which is right where she paused her speech. That's intentional. I really believe they are trying to go ahead and get people prepared for Kamala Harris to take that seat, that spot from Joe Biden. And how do they do that? They make it appear to the younger people that she is further to the left than Joe Biden and that she's calling for a ceasefire, which she's actually not. You heard the rest of that speech. They also had pictures. I'll see if I can find the picture. They had a picture of Kamala Harris walking across the bridge in Selma, Alabama. They did a photo op of that. Now, this gentleman here, he noticed it right off the bat. James Ray. She paused after there must be an immediate ceasefire before saying at least for the next 6 weeks, because she knows supporters of the administration can now clip it easily and disingenuously tell supporters of Palestinian liberation that the administration is pro ceasefire. 100%. He got it. He gets it. He understands what's happening there. Now, even on the readout on MSNBC, of course, they're going with this. They're rolling with it. And this is what I was telling you guys. They're all a part of this. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. This is Chris Van Hollen, talking to Joy Reid here about Kamala's ceasefire. They all just went with that PR talking point. They all got the message.
Today, Vice President Kamala Harris met with Bibi Netanyahu's biggest political rival, Israeli War Cabinet official Benny Gantz, where they discussed the urgency of achieving a hostage deal. Harris reiterated the administration's standard line that about Israel's right to defend itself. But
now, why is Kamala Harris meeting with him instead of Joe Biden? Unless they're trying to go ahead and swoop Kamala in to that seat. Wouldn't the president meet with him?
She expressed deep concern over the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The meeting comes one day after the vice president made this striking call for an immediate ceasefire while commemorating the Bloody Sunday March, where John Lewis and other voting rights activists were beaten in Selma, Alabama in 1965.
People in Gaza are starving. The conditions are inhumane. And our common humanity compels us to act. The threat of Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated. And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire.
And by the way, guys, when she's giving this speech, she is on that bridge. Okay. She's standing on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is in Selma, North Carolina. This is the bridge that civil rights activists and leaders have marched across before in the past. So you see what I mean? They're trying to signal something to the American people.
For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table. Hamas claims it wants a ceasefire. Well, there is a deal on the table. And as we have said, Hamas needs to agree to that deal.
And while her remarks were the most forceful that we've heard from anyone in the administration on the suffering in Gaza. And
no, see how you see how, guys, I hate to pause so quickly, but do you see how the PR, they all got the same PR talking points? She said Kamala Harris' message is the most forceful. Kamala Harris said the same thing that Joe Biden said just a couple weeks ago, which is that there would be the temporary pause. So you see how they're trying to butter her up and they're trying to polish Kamala to make her look shiny and attractive towards you. This is not trying to say people ugly, but I'm just saying they're trying to make her appeal attractive towards particularly the younger people who are out there protesting so that they can get them on board with the possibility of a Kamala Harris as president instead of Joe Biden.
The cheers from the crowd clearly reflected the popularity of that position among large parts of the Democratic base. Harris's call echoes the 6-week ceasefire that President Biden called for last week, with both Biden and Harris putting the onus on Hamas to agree to it. And the vice president insisted today that she and the president have been aligned from the beginning. The strong rhetoric from the administration comes as the humanitarian situation is indeed worsening, with more than 30,500 people dead, according to Gaza officials, and the United Nations saying that famine is inevitable. Today, a Palestinian U.S. official accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war. And the Palestinian Ministry of Information said that 16 children have died of malnutrition and dehydration. Joining me now is Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, who said recently that there was no excuse for the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Senator, thank you so much for being here. I, as you, and I'm sure lots of other people, watch these images of...
Did the hair become more blonde? I'm so confused. Joy, hon, the hair, no. No. And I've had my hair blonder too, but Joy, that hair is not cutting it, hon. It is not cutting it.
American sort of air balloons dropping food on the beaches of Gaza and people, cheering and running to get the balloons. And I watched it with sort of a combination of happiness that they're getting food and also sort of heartbreak that that's what we're down to. What do you make of the fact that it does appear that Vice President Harris is taking the lead on a different tack, at least rhetorically, and there we can see the balloons, and the administration seems to be shifting away from Netanyahu?
Well, Joy, it's good to be with you. And I was pleased to hear the vice president say what she said in strong terms. She was, of course, right to acknowledge Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas. But she was also right to point out that right does not extend to restricting humanitarian aid coming into Gaza.
Let me pause here because let me tell you something about this poser, okay? You see, Chris Van Hollen, he talks a good game, but Chris Van Hollen voted. He gave a speech criticizing Israel. And right after he gave that speech, he voted to send more aid to Israel. He's full of it. All these people there, this is a game. This is a game they're playing with you. They will never take it to the extent to fully criticize Israel for Zionism, because a lot of them are bought into Zionists as well. A lot of them are part of the Israeli lobby, or they're in bed with the Israeli lobby. They will never take it to the extreme to tell you the ultimate problem with Israel. Kamala Harris still won't call it a genocide. Neither will AOC, and you're going to see that in just a second. And neither will Chris Van Hollen. These people are playing you. This is a ploy to try to get the protests to calm down, to get the younger voters to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and support you guys after all now. This is nothing new. There was nothing that she said in that speech that was new compared to what we already heard a couple of weeks ago. But the media's role is to make you think it is new. The media's role is to make you think that it is bolder, it is stronger, so that you can try to like Kamala.
We now have at least 15 kids who have died of starvation. So there are hundreds of thousands who are on the verge of starvation, but now we have kids who have died of starvation. And like you, I was pleased to see the president order the airdrops, but that will only be a drop in the bucket given the need. The president has to demand, and he said there are no excuses, that the Netanyahu government open more of the crossings, that the Netanyahu government end the arbitrary restrictions on so much assistance trying to get into people of Gaza, and that the Netanyahu government make it safe to deliver assistance, because humanitarian aid workers have been killed by Israeli forces in the process of trying to get food to starving people. So
let me pause here. We're going to go to another clip, but there's something else I want to show you as well, because I'm telling you what they're trying to do in reference to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris doesn't have a favorable approval rating either. You know, it's not just Joe Biden, and neither does AOC, and we'll get to her in just a second as well. But I want to show you what the ultimate plan is here. When I say they're trying to polish Kamala and make her look attractive towards you, the same day that speech dropped, this picture was trending across Twitter. This is Kamala Harris walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Now, what are they trying to tell us with this picture? They are trying to tell us, look, this bridge where several civil rights leaders and activists marched across, you know, during the 60s, 50s, etc. Now we actually have a Asian/Black vice president, okay, walking across this bridge, but she's actually vice president. And she's able to do this because the activists paved the way for her to do so. Problem is, Kamala Harris, she's no activist. Kamala Harris is a part of the status quo. Kamala Harris, how dare they try to portray her in a sense as though she's like a Malcolm X or Martin Luther King? She's not. And I would say that Martin Luther King is actually more on the weaker end when we talk about bold revolution. Malcolm X is more revolutionary than Martin Luther King was, I would say. Fred Hampton, probably more revolutionary than all of them when we talk about the Black Panthers. But this is what they try to do and how they try to portray her walking across this bridge. This is why I'm trying to tell you. They are trying to make it so that we will accept her. This is their way to promote Kamala Harris. And then there was this article that came out as well in reference to her speech, which says, says, the administration officials watered down Kamala Harris' Gaza speech before delivery. So they're trying to get you here to think that she actually was going to say something more harsher, but they wanted it. Look at this. Before Vice President Kamala Harris delivered pointed remarks Sunday about the need for an immediate 6-week ceasefire between Israel and Hamas as part of a deal to release hostages, officials of the National Security Council toned down parts of her speech. 3 current U.S. officials and a former U.S. official familiar with the speech told NBC News. The original draft of Kamala Harris' speech, when it was sent to the National Security Council for review, was harsher on Israel about the dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip and the need for more aid than were the remarks she ultimately delivered. So, notice how it said it was harsher against Israel about the humanitarian situation, not harsher against Israel about Israeli policy and them actually working against international law. Nothing about the settlements, nothing about them kicking Palestinians out of their home, nothing about the rhetoric on the videos of the IDF calling Palestinians animals and savages, nothing about the ethnic cleansing remarks, nothing about that. Just the fact that we need to feed these people and let Israel still bomb them at the same damn time. 2, another thing that is revealing from this article, it tells you that the National Security Council toned down parts of her speech. Ladies and gentlemen, that just goes to show you that once again, the people that you think are in charge are not in charge. The vice president can't use her own speech that she supposedly wrote. The vice president can't make decisions. The president can't make decisions. Who's making all these damn decisions? You have the alphabet letter agencies making some of these decisions. You have billionaires making some of these decisions. You got the Clintons and the Obamas making some of these decisions. So this article, the way that I read it, some people might fall for that, but I'm looking at this article and I'm saying, oh, so you mean to tell me the vice president can't make their own decisions? Who's running the country? That's how I would look at it. Eric, we can go to the second part of Type V and C when you're ready. And we're going to move on to the AOC portion of the story as well, because Kamala Harris, the first gaslighter, and of course, all the media pundits got those talking points and they went with the same PR strategy to make it seem like Kamala is this next best thing. I don't think this is going to work the way that they think it's going to, but I really do feel like they're trying to slide her in to replace Joe Biden. Now, AOC, gaslighter number 2. AOC was approached about the same situation as she was leaving a movie theater in Brooklyn. Protesters approached her asking her to call it genocide. Get a load of this, folks. Ay, ay, ay.
You refuse to call it a genocide.
I need you to understand that this is not okay.
It's not okay that there's a genocide happening. You're not actively against it.
You're lying.
I'm lying?
You're not.
You went on TV and avoided talking about it.
For what? Because now you can't say it's a genocide for what you're deciding for political race. You can't call it a genocide. Then how do you say we're not lying.
We're not lying.
You've been saying it in interviews. It's insane. You haven't been calling it a genocide. Don't tell me I'm lying. Then just say it's a genocide. Just say it. Over 30,000 people are dead, AOC. You can't just say it for once. Just say.
So they're just asking her to say it is a genocide. That's it. They're not asking her to protest with them. They're not asking her to do a demonstration. They're just asking her to admit that what's happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza is a genocide.
Say a word. That's it. That's all we want you to say. Or you're not angry about people confronting you publicly. You can't call it genocide. Over 30,000 people have died.
Stop. Okay? Stop.
We're not doing anything. We're just talking to an elected public official. That's all we're doing. That's it. Just cut it, and you're going to cut this, and you're going to clip this so that it's completely out of context. I already said that it was, and y'all are just going to pretend that it wasn't over and over again. It's fucked up, man. And you're not helping these people, and you're not helping them.
You refuse to.
You're not helping them.
So first of all, Miss, you're not helping them.
You refuse to call
That is completely out of context. I already said that it was, and y'all are just gonna pretend that it wasn't over and over again. It's fucked up, man. And you're not helping these people, and you're not helping them.
You refuse to.
You're not helping them.
So according to AOC, she's telling the protesters and the activists that they're not helping the Palestinian people. So my question is this. Have you guys seen AOC at any of the pro-Palestinian protests or rallies? Because I sure as hell haven't. And I've attended those rallies. No? Was she at any of the DC pro-Palestinian rallies? What about all the ones that have been happening in her own city in New York just about every freaking weekend? Has she participated? Has she been a speaker at any of those rallies? I think if she had, you would have heard about it on social media, correct? But you see a lot of the third party and independent candidates, Claudia De La Cruz, Cornel West, Jill Stein, they've spoken at those rallies. They've marched in those protests. But AOC is gaslighting her voters and the viewers by telling the protesters that they're the ones that are not helping the Palestinian people. No, AOC, that would be you. You're not helping them because you're out here telling people that you endorse Joe Biden, Genocide Joe, who was responsible for giving the weapons and the aid to Israel in the first damn place so that they could commit the genocide of the Palestinian people. You don't have to tell them to vote for anyone. That's the other thing. You really don't have to endorse any damn body. If you didn't feel comfortable supporting Joe Biden, you could have just said, I plead the fifth. I'm staying out of this. I'm not endorsing anyone. You could have even done that. But no, you had to go as far as to endorse Joe Biden before the war in Gaza, and you did it after the war in Gaza. You didn't have to say, shit, I wouldn't have said anything. Or you could have gone a step further and you could have said to your supporters, that whatever's left of them, you could have said, guys, I think it's time we need to move towards a third party movement. I think it's time that we got to get out of this duopoly, and I'll be right there with you. You could have said that. Bernie Sanders could have said that. Neither one of you guys are going to say that because you are just now a part of the status quo as the very same people that you ran against. You may have ran against Joe Crowley, AOC, but you are now like Joe Crowley. But this is gaslighting when they sit here and they try to blame the protesters. She's done this before. When we had the marches for Medicare for all across this country, AOC tried to blame the protesters, the activists. You guys got to organize on the outside. That's the only way people are going to hear you in Congress. So people are organizing on the outside, and she's criticizing people for organizing on the damn outside. There's just no justification for it. Now, she says in that video that she already said that it was. I already said that it was. And you guys are going to clip this and you're going to make it be what you want it to be. Did she? Let's go back to this recent interview that she had with Meet the Press. I don't remember her saying that it was a genocide, but she was asked about it.
About what's happening in the Middle East. There are details about this potential emerging deal in which Israel would stop its war campaign for about 2 months in exchange for all of the hostages, given the argument by Israel, by the U.S. government, that applying pressure to Hamas was the only way to get the hostages out. Do you think that Israel's strategy on the point of the hostages has been effective?
I do not. We have seen, we know that Hamas as an organization, it does not have any regard for human life. I think that in Hamas's attack on October 7th, they knew what they were bringing on. They knew the violence that they were bringing on, and we have seen that. They understood the asymmetric attack that Israel will put out. Israel has been indiscriminately attacking Gazans, and we have seen over 25,000 Palestinians have been killed, over 70% of whom are women and children.
Using 25,000 lives as leverage and the idea that that is going to pressure Hamas, they are accountable to very little. But I think what is most important is saving these lives, ensuring the release of hostages, and in my view, negotiating a ceasefire.
Now, she just told you the number of people that have died. By the way, that number is now over 30,000 people, right? Since this interview, the number will continue to increase as they find more people that are under the rubble, just FYI. But here's that part.
Some of your colleagues, and we talked about what's happened at the protests this week, have called the president Genocide Joe. Some of your colleagues have accused the president of supporting genocide, including Rashida Tlaib. Do you agree with that word, genocide, that the president's been supporting a genocide, or does that go too far?
There it is.
I think what we are seeing right now throughout the country is that young people are appalled at the violence and the indiscriminate loss of life. We are not just seeing 25,000 people that have died in Gaza. We are seeing the starvation of millions of people, the displacement of over 2 million Gazans. We have South Africa that has mounted a court in the ICJ. The ICJ ruled this week that Israel has a grave responsibility to prevent genocide.
But they're still
fact
determining whether it's a genocide. Do you think that
they are
term
still
is responsible,
determining
given
it?
that it's still under investigation?
I believe that they're still determining it, but in the interim ruling, the fact that they said there's a responsibility to prevent it, the fact that this word is even in play, the fact that this word is even in our discourse, I think demonstrates the mass inhumanity that Gazans are facing. And so whether you are an individual that believes this is a genocide, which, by the way, in our polling, we are seeing large amounts of Americans concerned specifically with that word. So I don't think that it is something to completely toss someone out of our public discourse for using. But I think what we are seeing here is that the Netanyahu government has lost public support, and that we have a responsibility to protect the human rights and the humanity of Gazans and hostages alike in the area.
All right. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really appreciate you continuing to gaslight the American people. So I wanted to show you that, just to remind you that she did not call it a genocide. She has called for a ceasefire, but that's not what they were asking her to do. Now, if you notice in that video, she was very uncomfortable. She was just kind of like, stop asking me this. Don't get away. Just go. Right? She didn't want them following her. You wanted to be a public, official AOC. You wanted to be a congressperson. People have the right to come to you with questions, and people have the right to protest, and people have the right for their protest to make you feel uncomfortable. Isn't that exactly what you once said? You see, if we go back to this tweet from AOC from December 2nd, 2020, the whole point of protesting is to make people uncomfortable. Activists take that discomfort with the status quo and advocate for concrete policy changes. Popular support often starts small and grows. To folks who complain, protest demands make others uncomfortable. That's the point. That's the point, AOC. And to use her own statement against her, that means, AOC, that people now see you as part of the status quo. That's why they're protesting against you. These aren't the people who voted against you. These are the people who actually supported you and believed in you. But it seems like you don't want to make yourself uncomfortable. They have a right to do that with everyone except for you. So that shows you just how far you've fallen. This gentleman here actually said, his name is D. AOC is my representative, Parkchester / Soundview, Bronx, about a dozen store owners who are Palestinian, or at least from one side of the parent. I visited them months ago to check how they are doing. Many of them feel angry at AOC and this country for allowing the genocide to happen. But that's gaslighter number 2. Now we go to the final gaslighter, and that is Bernie Sanders. Because Bernie Sanders is out here gaslighting for the American people as Well, again, part of the status quo. And I got to tell you, Bernie Sanders need to stop doing interviews as well. Just stop.
It seems like political pressure might be one thing to get the administration to take a more aggressive posture vis-a-vis Netanyahu. And I wonder what you made of the results from the Michigan primary earlier this week. Over 100,000 people voting uncommitted as an effective protest vote against this administration's policy.
It tells me, and I think it tells the White House, that there are large numbers of young people, large numbers of minority people, large numbers of Americans who are sick and tired of the slaughter of the Palestinian people. And again, this is not some distant thing. This is with our tax dollars. Those guns and the planes largely or significantly are paid for by U.S. tax dollars. So the word is, again, we cannot continue to support this right-wing extremist government. No more money. We must demand a fundamental change of policy.
Do you think that this could be an issue that could decide the 2020, if not entirely, you think this could be a deciding factor in the election?
Well, people have got to know that, Trump is, even more pro-Israel than Biden has been. But I think what you're going to see is a lot of young people, people of color, people of Arab descent saying, you know what, I don't like Trump, but I'm not going to come out and vote. So it could be decisive in that sense.
Orange man bad. Now, he just gave you a list of things that are problematic that's happening in Gaza. Not all of them. Still didn't go far enough. Still won't say genocide, just like AOC and Kamala Harris. And Bernie Sanders won't even call for a ceasefire till this day, right? But he did say we got to stop sending the aid, etc. So let me just break something down for you folks. Notice there at the end how he said that, well, Trump's even more pro-Israel than Joe Biden. So essentially what Bernie Sanders is asking the American people, the younger voters, do you want a little bit of genocide or do you want a lot of genocide? How about we don't want any genocide, Bernie? So he's still trying to use Donald Trump derangement syndrome to get the young voters to come out and to get people to still continue to support Joe Biden. We all know what Joe Biden is doing. We all know that the weapons that are going to Israel coming from this country in particular has actually aided that genocide. And had it not been for the weapons and support from the United States government, Israel would have not been able to kill all the Palestinian people that they have killed today. Never forget that. So these people, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, AOC, these people are gaslighters. And what they do every now and then, they pop up, whether it's an interview or whether it's a tweet that they have, they pop up every now and then and they'll say a little bit of something to make it seem like they're on the right side of history and that they actually agree with some of the progressive values or even socialist values. But at the end of the day, they're trying to have 2 feet in 2 separate places. So they're trying to have their left foot on one side and their right foot on the other side. And sometimes you can't straddle the line. Sometimes you have to pick a side. And it's very telling that when it comes to the state of Israel, because so many of our Congress members are in bed with the Israeli lobby and they've taken money from the Israeli lobby, they don't want to rock that boat. Notice how easy they can call out Netanyahu and say right-wing extremist. That's easy for them to do. It's more difficult for them to call out Zionism as a whole. Without Zionism, you don't get a Netanyahu. Never forget that. So they appear to make it seem like Joe Biden is moving further to the left. He is not. This is all a game. And they are gaslighting you. They're gaslighting the protesters. They're gaslighting taxpayers. They're gaslighting anybody who sees what Israel is doing, and they should be ashamed of themselves. If you live in AOC's district, I highly recommend that you run against her. But when you run against her, don't run against her as a Democrat or Republican. You need to run against her as an independent. Somebody needs to challenge AOC. Jose is challenging Richie Torres. Somebody needs to challenge AOC because her ass needs to be broke. And when I say that, that's not a physical thing. What I'm saying is her spirit needs to be broken. She needs to go. She's got to get out of Congress because she has become very, I feel she's become very entitled And she feels like she deserves to be there just because, when she's not delivering on the promises that she made to people in her district, to her constituents. She won't talk to protesters now, but she can walk up in the Met Gala and parade around with a dress on and take pictures like she's a celebrity. But she ignores all of you guys. Years ago, she would have been out in the streets with you. Now she's against you. So pay attention. All these people need to be shaken up. Whether that's Bernie Sanders, AOC, all these people got to go. In a political way. These people have got to go. Because they're not making things better for us. You know what's getting our voices heard? It's the people in the streets. It's not AOC. It's not Bernie. It's not Kamala. None of them have been at these protests. None of them. None of them have supported them. None of them have shared these protests. All they've done is worry about themselves and their political careers. So don't let the gaslighters continue gaslighting, okay? We are going to do call in tonight. We got some things to talk about. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to sub and share. And don't forget, special live stream tomorrow, Wednesday afternoon. I will be live because I'm going on vacation Thursday. All right, Eric's going to come in for a bit and I'll be right back.
All right. And I can also announce, if you're missing some political talk on Friday because Sabby's away, Corey and I are going to be hosting another Forum 11. Let's see, I announced this on Twitter. Let me see if I can bring that up. But that'll be this Friday in the time slot where you would be seeing Sabby. We're going to do one of our Forum 11 shows, and we're going to have several guests. Was slated to have Oz the Boomer from Beauty and the Boomer as part of on the panel. Here we are, Forum 11. And a certain friend that you know from this chat, I believe Mr. Mastermind Hour is actually going to be participating. And a couple other people. Oh, also our very special guest, our most important guest on Friday will be, which I should go full screen for this, will be manipulating the camera and doing this at once. All right. Our very special guest will be Miss Kiva the cat. Oh, I'm fooling around with the wire here. Sorry. All right. There we go. Will be Miss Kiva. Hey, wake up. You're a star. All right. But if you want to see more Kiva, you're going to have to tune in on Friday because she's going to also be a star on then. So that's this Friday at 8 in usual Sabby. Oh, and that's going to be on my channel, the Eric T. Red channel. But I'll be putting out links and stuff for that as we get closer to it. But before that, Sabby will be on tomorrow. And let's see. Oh yeah, so let's get into some super chats. That's what we got queued up here. Thanks for the super chat, Unemployed Scholar. Promising checks to voters in exchange for voting for specific candidates is known as vote buying. It signals an unfair and not free election. Thanks for the chat. This super chat, P. Smith. Joy has the same hair as Bad Orange Man. There you go. If only the hair was the worst thing about her. And Blizzard Jenkins, thanks for this super chat. Can you imagine the amount of pandering we will see if they push Kamala to be the nominee? Yeah, I mean, pandering is about all they got. And thanks also for this one. The Skiwi gang won't let us hear the end of it. Thanks for those. Thanks for this super chat. Where is the love? Love your show, Sabby, and thank you for what you do. Thank you for that super chat. And thanks for this one, Sparky. Sparky says, love you, Sabby. And thanks for the super chat, Oninka. And sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Oninka. Sabby, as you said a week ago, there's no rest for the wicked. Kamala has zero chance. Thanks for that. And thanks also for this one. Happy pieces, wishing you a safe and blessed born day, Sabby. Thank you for those. And thanks for the super chat. Unemployed Scholar. ICC case opening against Australia government Officials in Nicaragua filed against Germany. Time running out for the accomplices in the genocide. Their fear is obvious. They know they're guilty. Thank you for that one, Mr. Unemployed Scholar. And let's see, we've got something out here on the Rockfin. Let's see what that's looking like. Thanks for this tipped comment on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Sabby, this shows you on a state-by-state basis how many people are registered to vote and under what party. There are 20 states where voters don't register under a party, only their politicians. There is no way those states would have anyone running them except indies. Please put in chat or bring it up if you are curious. And he has a link here that he posted out on Rockfin. And let me see if I can get this to scroll right. And thanks for this super chat or this paid tipped comment out here on the Rockfins. Skip M. They need to replace Joe before the summer in order for her to be an alternative. It is the first time I have heard a coherent sentence from her. Well, I mean, coherent might be a little bit generous from what we're hearing from old Kamala Harris there. But yeah, it's a curious thing, like how they're working if they do end up getting up Joe. There's also the theory of doing it at the convention, basically going through all these machinations, and then Joe Biden isn't up to it, and then and all of a sudden they need to slip in someone else. It could be Kamala, it could be Gavin Newsom, but the thing you will know is that the person that does get in, one way or another, if they're a Democrat or if they're a Republican, they will be a loyal servant of the corporate establishment, of the billionaires. That's really what all this is about. And this is really one of the things that I always try to stress is that it's a mistake to view Democrats or Republicans as, in terms of national elected officials, it's a mistake to view them as being very different. I mean, they both, the differences are superficial, and a big part of the game is to have us fighting, these fights among each other over the social issues and things like that, and not talking about what should be the real issues, which is, if you heard me talk before, you know what I'm going to say, the money and corruption. Like here, bad cookies, he said it. As Eric T says, follow the money. Yeah, no, always follow the money. I always say to hit, when you're talking about any of these things is to always finish with MCDS: money, corruption, demands, solutions. And so, if you're not doing that and getting to your demands, then I think you're not hitting the full point. Always hit the corruption if you really want to understand what's going on. And yeah. I mean, that's my bit, but you can hear more about that on Friday too, if you want, if you're ready for the deep dive with our Form 11 panel, and you can finally see Corey on air again. It's been a while.
Yeah, definitely. Because I won't be here Thursday or Friday. I will be live tomorrow afternoon, but not Thursday or Friday. So definitely hop over and watch Eric's live stream there about demands and money and corruption and solutions. And I'm actually going to, when Eric sends me the link to the video, I'll send it out via my newsletter. For those of you subscribed to my newsletter, my live stream links always go out, so you'll always know, when I'm live. But for Friday, you'll know that Eric will be live. I'll send that out through my newsletter, and then you guys can check that out. So yeah,
we may have some special guests. We'll see. All right, we'll see you in the call-ins.
It is what it is. And I was good on time tonight. And tomorrow I will start with the New York ballot measure results for 2023. So we're getting closer to June. Once we get over to June / early July, that's when I'll start talking about the ballot measures for 2024, what will be on your ballot that you need to know about. So, but right now we're going to head on over to call-in episode. I think it's 158. I got to check. I know some of you asked me why haven't I posted some of the other ones. Call-in has not been the best in reference to me posting some of the recordings. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's just because nobody's really monitoring the app anymore like they used to, which sucks a fat one. But Kamala's speech, Israel, real estate homes, which we discussed tonight, Trump and Scotus. We can also talk about, what was the other one? Oh, Richard Wolff, underemployment, or whatever else you want to talk about. You guys know how we do things on call-in. So the link is actually pinned to the top of the live chat. You can join using the app. Those of you that call in all the time, you know how to do this. But if you're new and you want to call in and you don't have the app, you can also click on that link and you can join via your laptop as well. So yeah, let's head on over there, guys. And you know how we do this. Have a good night. Or also, I forget, Nick is live on Revolutionary Blackout Network. He should be live now. You can check Nick out tonight as well. All right. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.